Have you ever just stood in a pharmacy aisle and felt completely overwhelmed? I mean, there are thousands of different medicines out there, each with a name that's impossible to pronounce. But what if I told you there's a system to all of it, a kind of playbook that helps us make sense of how every single drug works, from what it's made of to what it actually does in your body? Well, today, we're going to break down that very playbook.
So that's the big question, right? With all these drugs out there, antibiotics, painkillers, antidepressants, how do we possibly get a handle on it all? How are they organized? And maybe more importantly, how do they actually do what they do? That's exactly what we're going to get into.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll unpack the four main playbooks that scientists and doctors use to classify every single medicine. Then, we're going to dive into three real-world case files, fighting off infections, managing pain and fever, and even how drugs can influence our mind and mood. And finally, we'll wrap things up by looking at the double-edged sword of pharmacology, all that power and all the risks that come with it.
To really get a grip on any drug, you first have to know how it's classified. Think of it like a library. You can sort books by the author's last name, by genre like sci-fi or history, or by that Dewey Decimal System. Well, drugs are pretty much the same, and there are four main ways to categorize them. Four playbooks that tell us everything we need to know.
So here they are, the four playbooks. First up is the chemical playbook. This is all about the drug's basic blueprint, its molecular structure. Next, we have the pharmacological playbook, and this one is huge. It tells us how the drug actually works inside the body, its mechanism of action. You could call it the drug's core strategy. Third is the therapeutic playbook, which is probably the one you're most familiar with. What is this thing supposed to treat? And finally, we've got the regulatory playbook, which is all about its legal status. Is it over the counter, or do you need a prescription? These four lenses are exactly how we're going to analyze every drug we look at today.
All right, let's put this system into practice with our very first case file, fighting invaders. We're talking about antibiotics, some of the most important medicines ever discovered. Let's dig into a tale of two really common but really different antibiotics.
Okay, so on the surface, ampicillin and chloramphenicol have the exact same therapeutic goal: kill bacteria. Simple enough. But their pharmacological playbooks? Completely different. Ampicillin acts like a saboteur. It attacks the bacteria's cell wall, that peptidoglycan stuff. It basically makes the factory walls just crumble and fall apart. Now, chloramphenicol, it takes a totally different route. It's more like a secret agent. It sneaks inside the factory and shuts down the main assembly line, the ribosome, so the bacteria can't even produce the proteins it needs to survive. So you see, two totally different strategies, but they both get the job done.
All right, on to our second case file, and this is something you've probably got in your home right now. Pain and fever. We're talking aspirin, ibuprofen, and paracetamol. You might know that last one as acetaminophen. They all seem to do the same thing, don't they? Well, let's demystify that medicine cabinet of yours.
This table really shows how drugs that seem so similar can have these crucial differences. Now, all three of them work by blocking enzymes called COX enzymes. Think of these as the culprits that create pain and inflammation signals in your body. But, and this is a big but, look at that mechanism row. See how they block them differently? Aspirin's block is irreversible. It shuts that enzyme down for good. That unique action is why it's also used in tiny doses to prevent blood clots. Ibuprofen's block is reversible. It's more temporary. And paracetamol is way more targeted, working mostly in the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord. Now, let your eyes drift down to the major risk row. You can see how those different mechanisms lead to completely different potential side effects. The big takeaway here is that no two painkillers are created equal. And just to really hammer one specific point home, when it comes to bringing a fever down, what we call antipyretic potency, there's a bit of a difference. While all three work, studies generally show that ibuprofen has a slight edge in how powerfully it can reduce a fever compared to paracetamol and aspirin. It's a small detail, but it's one of those things that can help guide a doctor's decision. Okay, time for our final case file, mind and mood. We're now entering the incredibly complex world of psychotropic medications. These are drugs designed to interact with the amazing, intricate chemistry of our brains to influence how we think and feel. When we say antidepressants, we're not talking about just one thing. We're actually talking about several different families of drugs, and each one has its own strategy. Most of them work on neurotransmitters. Those are the chemical messengers your brain cells use to talk to each other. The most common type, SSRIs, they work by making more of the feel-good messenger, serotonin, available for your brain to use. Others, like SNRIs, do that for both serotonin and another messenger, norepinephrine. Each class is just a different approach to fine-tuning our brain's chemistry to help regulate mood. The word tranquilizer can also be pretty confusing, but it really splits into two totally separate categories. Major tranquilizers, which are also called antipsychotics, mainly work by blocking dopamine receptors. They're used to manage serious conditions like psychosis. Minor tranquilizers, like benzodiazepines, work on a completely different system. They boost the activity of a neurotransmitter called GABA, which basically tells the brain to calm down, helping to reduce anxiety. And that brings us to our final and really crucial section. For all of their incredible life-saving power, many medicines are a double-edged sword. Their very ability to change our body's chemistry is both their greatest strength and the source of their biggest risks, things like tolerance and addiction. So the problem often kicks off with a process called tolerance. Just like it says here, this is when your body literally adapts to a drug, so you need more and more of it to get the same effect. Think of it this way. Your brain cells start to become less sensitive to the drug to try and keep things in balance. This isn't a moral failing, not at all. It's a physical chemical adaptation, and it's this process that can pave the road to physical dependence. And this all leads to a massive insight. Addiction is fundamentally a chemical process. It's about brain chemistry. As this quote on the screen puts it so well, certain substances can literally hijack the brain's natural reward pathways. They flood the system with messengers like dopamine, messing up that delicate chemical balance, and pretty much rewiring the brain to put the drug first above everything else. That's what creates those powerful cravings and messes with our ability to make good decisions. So this leaves us with a final, really big question to think about. We've seen that these medicines are incredibly powerful chemical tools. As our understanding of the brain's own playbook gets deeper and deeper, is it possible to design drugs that are powerful enough to heal, but also smart enough to not hijack our own internal reward systems? Can we actually engineer the benefits without the devastating risks of misuse? That right there is the central challenge and the ultimate promise of modern pharmacology.